So imagine this. This is the antidote to moral relativism. Okay, so the first thing is that there are real problems, and hierarchical organizations can offer real solutions, socially and personally. So you can confront the problems courageously and you can solve them. So that's real. It ameliorates suffering and limits malevolence. And so there's nothing morally relative about that. The second is that sense of meaning that we discussed. That's not some philosophical second-order consequence of thinking. It's way deeper than that. That sense of meaning tells you when you're Vygotsky, the Russian psychologist, called that the zone of proximal development, which I believe is where the phrase the zone came from. And so in the zone of proximal development, this is what adults do with children, little kids that are learning to talk. Adults automatically talk to little children who are learning to talk at a level that slightly exceeds their current vocabulary. They do that without even knowing it. And that puts those kids in the zone, right? Because if you just talk baby talk to kids, then all they learn is baby talk. And if you just talk like an adult, then they don't understand a word you're saying. So you find this happy medium in between where the kid mostly understands what you're talking about and that you're pulling them forward. So that puts them in the zone. And that's a meaningful zone. And so you can feel the operation of that zone in your own life. That's what the Taoists are on about, because they say, well, the Tao is the way, right? And that's the pathway between chaos and order. That's meaning. And you can feel that in your life when you're deeply engaged in something. Like we have deeply engaging conversations, okay, which is part of the reason that we keep having them, and I think why they're popular. And we're not paying attention to how the clock is ticking or how time is flowing or even to the fact that we're doing what we're doing. We're just having a conversation. And it's meaningful, it's engaged, it keeps our eyes focused and our senses concentrated on what's happening. And the reason for that is that there's enough information flowing between us so that we're being slightly transformed as a consequence of the discussion, right? So we're both comfortable, we trust each other, we trust that the conversation is aimed at something that's of mutual benefit. We trust each other to tell the truth to the degree that we're capable of doing that. And then when you engage in this exchange of information, and to the degree that it's breaking you down a little bit and building you up in a different way, that's a little death and rebirth. There's constant little deaths and rebirths in a meaningful conversation. Then that keeps you alive and functioning. And that focuses you, like, that speaks to you so deeply that focus happens without any consciousness. And that's meaning. And that's that line between chaos and order. And that's real. That has nothing, and I would say, here's another thing that's cool. So that line between chaos and order, that's the same thing that's happening when you're playing a game properly, right? Because you're in the game and you're exercising your skill, but you're pushing it. But you're pushing it in a way that's also a benefit to your teammates and to the progression of the game as such, and to being a better general player. You're doing all that at the same time. And you're evolved with enough natural intelligence so that the sum total output of your nervous system says to you, you're in the right place at the right time doing the right thing. And that's what makes your life meaningful. And that's real. And I think it's more real than anything else. I think it's more real than suffering. I think it's more real than malevolence, because it's the antidote to both of those. And so the whole moral relativism issue for me is a non-starter. It's just wrong. There's lots of ways of interpreting the world, but there aren't very many ways of interpreting it optimally. And you can feel when you're doing that. It makes you stronger. And then the people that come to me after my talks and say, well, I've been putting my life together. I've developed a vision. I've been trying to be more responsible. I've been trying to be more honest and put my relationships together. They're all sparkly-eyed because of this, or crying sometimes, because it's really had an impact on them at a deep level. They think, oh, wow, this actually works. It's like, yeah, it actually works. It's real. It's real. And I would say as well that that's associated with the idea of the deep Western idea of the logos, which is meaning in action and speech. So, if we have a conversation that's meaningful, then that's a manifestation of the spirit of the logos. And that's the thing that destroys and recreates at the same time. Because you learn something, it destroys a little presupposition that you had that was erroneous and replaces it with something that's healthier. And every time you have a meaningful conversation, that happens. It's like a little tweak. Now, I wasn't quite right here. Click. That moves and something new takes its place. And that's a little death and rebirth instead of the catastrophic death and rebirth that you might have to have if you weren't paying attention. So that's all tied together. That's all tied together with that phenomenon of meaning. And that's the same as the adoption of responsibility. That all ties together so nicely.